Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today on the Building Bellingham Pivot Series. I'm here with some wonderful people that some just now meeting, some that I've met. So thank you to all of you for taking time and, being inside on a sunny day when you could be outside and talking a little bit more about what's going on in your worlds. Ray, don't be fooled by our audience. Don't be fooled that Ray is not actually in the Starship Enterprise. I think he's here on Earth, potentially. We'll find out.
You never can tell.
Yeah.
Never can tell. So I am going to just start in the order that the little squares are on my screen here. So in the upper left corner, I've got Aaron. Aaron, tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and your organization.
Sure. So my name is Aaron Newcomb, and I'm one of the founders and directors of Engedi Refuge. Engedi Refuge is a residential program for victims of sex trafficking. What we provide is a very comprehensive and therapeutic program for prostituted women coming out of classic sex trafficking. And this program involves housing. So we provide all the physical needs of the people that come to us. Generally, women come without anything. If anything, the clothes on their back, maybe a bag of a few changes of clothes. And that's about it. Absolutely destitute, often running from others, from traffickers for their own safety. So safety is primary concern, and it's kind of number one for Engedi Refuge. But we also, our whole program is built to help women be restored, to find a sense of peace, security, and healing. And that happens over a period of time. So the program itself is designed to be long-term, 6 months to about a year and a half. And with the whole goal is to community reintegration so that they feel empowered and safe within themselves, within their own skin, within their ability to manage relationships and to kind of reintegrate in a healthy way.
Yeah. And locally, obviously you're here in Whatcom County. What are some numbers that you see locally? How many people come through your doors, and how big of an issue is this?
Well, it's a huge issue, and what people don't often understand is that the efforts to touch the lives of trafficked individuals in the United States it's a national and regional issue. So it's not like we're trying to just kind of connect with everybody that's prostituted within the Bellingham area. We and every agency, and there's probably 130 to 140 agencies like Engedi around the country, are trying to provide services with people not only locally but nationally, because it's such a shortage of specified services for this demographic. So what we provide serves Washington State. Probably 40 to 50% of our residents come from Washington State, and the rest come from all around the country. It's true of every agency that's doing this kind of work. The numbers are in the hundreds of thousands of people in the United States that are trafficked. The beds available, the best read that we have on that right now is about 1,000 to 1,100 beds available specifically for people that are suffer human trafficking, and we have about 1% of those available beds are Engedi Refuge beds. So it's really kind of boiling it down to just being able to serve just a few, and there's a lot of effort to try to communicate those resources to the people that need to get them.
Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining us today. Emily O'Connor, you're here on the right side. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, what organization you represent, and what your organization does.
Well, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I have the privilege of serving as executive director of Lydia Place for the past 8 or so years now. And Lydia Place has been around in Whatcom County for just over 30 years, working to address homelessness, particularly focused on families with children. And that looks a bunch of different ways for us, but obviously this has been a really big issue here in Whatcom County, as it is regionally and across our country. And so we are really looking at trying to address the issue of homelessness, not just from a crisis intervention perspective and trying to address an individual episode of homelessness, but to really think about what those systemic issues are that lead to poverty being this cycle and homelessness being this cycle within families. And so our goal is for the children that we serve in our housing programs today, for them to be not just a little bit better off than their parents were, but we want them on a significantly better path such that they aren't then accessing or needing to access those services as they get older and grow up, which is a hugely complicated problem. But Lydia Place provides primarily 3 core functions. So in addition to working with folks who are experiencing homelessness and getting them into housing and providing really intensive case management and rental assistance support, we also have a parenting program. So we do in-home parent education and support. And then we also have a clinical behavioral health program as well. So really bringing those 3 pieces together. And those services are all based on a home delivery system. So it's been really interesting for us to pivot these past couple of months away from delivering services in home to delivering services like this. But we have about 150 housing placements at any given time. So that's about the breadth of the number of families we can serve at a time. And we work with folks for as long as they need us. So sometimes that's a shorter term intervention, and sometimes that is years and years of support. We serve a lot of single moms. There's that's a big need around housing, and we work really closely with so many other organizations, including those here on this call today, to try and make sure that we're bringing that kind of robust, comprehensive support to the families that we're serving. And we have a long way to go in that. And this is, with COVID, it's such an interesting time to engage in some of those conversations about what poverty looks like. And what percentage of our families here in Whatcom County really struggle to meet just basic needs. And it's a pretty staggering number. And now, of course, just going in the opposite direction. So it's a privilege to be able to do this work here in this community. And there's so many wonderful organizations and humans also collaborating and contributing to that. But I think that the real task to us now is going to be how to not lose ground while we address the public health crisis that COVID has presented us with.
Yeah, absolutely. Just another layer, right? It's just another layer. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do here with the Lighthouse mission in Bellingham.
Yeah, my name is Bridget Reeves, and I have the opportunity to serve as the Associate Executive Director at the Lighthouse Mission. And so I've been with the mission for a little over 10 years, in this role for almost 4. And every day is an adventure here. Our mission is to heal homelessness with Christ's power and love. And so on the ground, practically how that looks is mainly through 4 avenues of programming. And so that includes our outreach services, which includes our Street Connect and Shower Connect vans and outreach, where we go out to camps throughout the community, as well as bringing showers to people throughout Whatcom County. And then we have our drop-in center program, which is the one that probably gets the most publicity in general. It's the most visible one for folks. And on average, we're serving about 160 people there on any given night at our drop-in center. And that includes usually around 40 women to about 120 men in general, give or take a few. And then from the drop-in center, after that program, which acts as our low barrier, more easy access program for the mission. It's kind of our big welcome to folks initially coming into services, and it also serves as a bit of a hub for other service providers to come and meet with folks, for folks that are coming in as clients to meet with counselors or treatment providers, or get access to health services or other things along those lines. And then we have our recovery programs, which include our Ascent and Agape program, our men's and women's recovery programs. And those are our clean and sober housing programs. Our Ascent program houses on average 30 to 40 men at any given time, and they do classes weekly and meet with a case manager for intensive case management and have a host of other services provided there. And then at our Agape home for women and children, we have on average about 50 to 60 women and children staying at any given time, and there's intensive case management and classes and other services provided there as well. And so that's kind of the gamut of services provided at the mission. On any given night, we have around 230 to 250 people staying at the mission. And right now, of course, one of the ways we've pivoted is our drop-in center program is not at the mission proper down on Holly Street, but our drop-in center is right now at Bellingham High School to allow that social distancing. And I can speak more to that later, but in general, we have about 250 people here on campus each night. We also have our meals program, and so we serve 3 meals a day to folks not only in our program, but to anyone that needs breakfast, lunch, and dinner throughout the community. And so that has continued to happen at Bellingham High School since we moved there as well. The mission's been around since 1923, and we've continue to adapt and change as things have changed in our community. And I think that this is a really important conversation, particularly right now, as we look at next steps for housing in our community and making sure that we as a community are prepared to welcome people in when they are ready for housing and looking for that and have those jobs and that sort of thing. So I really appreciate being invited today and being able to be with all these other amazing organizations sharing of the need in our community and the ways that we can meet that. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And Ray from the Starship Enterprise, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Leo. The virtual background here does actually play a place, not just for fun. It plays a practical role in my life because I have 2 toddlers in my house, and anytime they hear me talking to my computer, they want to come check it out. And one of them is potty training, which means I don't want to flash the whole world if he sneaks up on me. So the virtual background helps keep that from happening. So I serve as the founding director at Skookum Kids, which is a foster care agency. We will, here in about a month, celebrate our 5th anniversary. Which is just wild to think about. Our mission, as it's like, formally written, is to eliminate the pain points that make life unnecessarily difficult for foster parents and social workers. The Ray version of that is we think foster care is harder than it needs to be, and we want to make it easier. We do that in 2 really big ways and a bunch of little ways. The first big way, the thing that most people know us for, is we operate an emergency shelter for children entering foster care for the first time. So kids from all over Western Washington who have been victims of abuse or neglect and are probably, not always, but in most of the time, headed into a foster home. They come stay with us at our emergency shelter for about a week, and we can help them to stabilize and learn a little more about them, which then informs exactly what kind of foster home we're looking for that the children would be best suited in. So it's really important and solves a pain point in foster care that we call the 72-hour problem, which is, that caring for a child in their first 72 hours of foster care is very different than the rest of the time that they will spend in foster care. So Skookum House is what we call the emergency shelter, is sort of built specifically to address that unique challenge. So about 4 kids a week that we average, so roughly 200 kids a year that come through Skookum House. So that's big thing one. Big thing two is we help families who want to pitch in, want to become foster parents and help take care of kids, to navigate the licensing process. We do a training for them. We help them to get licensed and then support them throughout their foster parenting career, kind of act as a guide to the strange and foreign world of foster care. So that's Skookum Kids.
Awesome. Ray, thank you for joining us. And, I want to talk a little bit about COVID, but I really like talking about what we're doing going forward, right? Because January, we hear about it. March, February kind of develops. March, all of a sudden it's real. And we have these mandates in place to stay home and stay healthy, obviously. And that's affected businesses, nonprofits, other organizations in a lot of different ways. There are some silver linings to it, but there's a lot of challenge and tragedy and involved with that. And so just if you wouldn't mind just stepping through your experience with, okay, January, we hear about COVID-19, it's overseas, it's not a big deal, it's in some other country, right? We're just going about our daily lives. And all of a sudden, boom, we're an hour away from what is considered to be the epicenter of this pandemic. Step me through and just jump right into it, whoever would like to, your story between January and now, because we're truly in a position now where things are starting to change in a potentially positive way. How has that affected you all?
I'll jump in. Oh, great. Go for it.
I was first week of March, I was traveling and I was in the Seattle airport, and I just happened to pick up a newspaper and flipped it open, and it was right in the middle of, section B8 or something was a story about coronavirus. And there was a photo of a fire station in Kirkland that was responding to the outbreak there, where it was originally in the United States. And the photo was of a buddy of mine who lives in Bellingham and is a firefighter in Kirkland. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be a thing. I think this is not far off. It was a very sobering moment. All of a sudden it's here, and it was just surreal. I think everybody has a moment like that for COVID. For us, it was a matter of all the real work was done in January and February in writing the plans to get ready for what we kind of thought was a distant future possibility. And then, when all of a sudden, the way you described it's really good. All of a sudden, oh man, it's here now. We quickly found out how good our planning had been. And that's a credit to people other than me who took this process very seriously. I think, in January and February, it was easy to sort of discount it as I've been given this busy work to do to plan for what if COVID-19 is a thing here. But, staff at Skookum really took it quite seriously. And then when we had to very, very, very quickly turn on those plans and use them, they held up and worked really well. So didn't mean to jump on you there, Bridget. The Zoom's got a little lag. Sorry.
Bridget, what about you? Tell me about your story and what that was like.
Yeah, we had begun talking about plans and processing through and creating some protocols in February for the arrival of coronavirus to our area. And we had already, in the beginning of March, we had set aside some rooms at both Agape and Ascent and developed some plans around if we needed to quarantine people there in those spaces and those shelters. And so we had that space set aside and had conversations with the health department about protocols and walked through all of that and looked at CDC guidelines for homeless shelters. And then we got this call on this Saturday night in mid-March about the hospital interested in, they were wondering if they could send somebody that they had just tested for coronavirus back to the drop-in center, and if we had space for them to quarantine there. And said, well, we had developed these spaces in our other programs. But at that point, all of the ideas that we had been in conversations with the city and the county and the health department about spaces for people from the drop-in center to quarantine, because the drop-in center on Holly Street is one big room. And so there's not really a lot of space to quarantine folks. That's not as possible. And so the hospital thankfully was able to hold that person overnight. And the following morning, the idea of, what about the schools? What if we were able to move to a high school or another school in the area, that came about. And so that week was a whirlwind of a week, and it became very clear, even though that person ended up being negative, it became very clear that the need was going to arrive at some point, and we needed to be prepared. We needed more social distancing, because the reality was that if we did not have space for people to social distance at our drop-in center, for instance, like we did in our other programs, we would have to turn people away. And what that would result in is about 110 people being turned out to the streets due to social distancing standards and where the mats needed to be placed and all of the building requirements and everything. And so we are so grateful for the community coming together. It really was this huge community effort coming together to make that happen. And since we have been at the high school, we've been really, really grateful for that space and the social distancing. And I think all of those proactive measures have allowed us to be where we are at today, with still no positive cases in any of our mission programs, which has been amazing. But that was a lot of work on behalf of the entire community to make that happen. And we realized that, even as you said, that it looks like things in the community and our nation are changing potentially in a direction of things are opening back up and everything. That doesn't necessarily mean on our end of things that we can move right back into our old spaces at the drop-in center and at the mission. And so we're continuing to have conversations about where next. If we continue to have to social distance, like as school opens back up and we have to hand back over Bellingham High School and move out, though we've loved the space, they do want it back very soon. And so we've been in lots of conversations about what next. And I've been really encouraged with that and excited about what could come from that as well. It's been definitely a whirlwind, and lots of credit to the whole community for making that happen. Yeah.
Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, I just want to say, Bridget, that is amazing. I've actually thought about calling you guys and asking how you're doing this, because my thought had been that would be the most vulnerable to a widespread of COVID-19 in your scenario. So it's really amazing that you haven't had any active cases. For us, we had similar kind of thing, kind of that preparatory mindset in January, February of, wow, this thing is kind of gone from China to Seattle, and oh my gosh, isn't that interesting? I wonder what we should do. So looking into the CDC rules and preparing ourselves in our mind, but still feeling like that's probably far-fetched that it would actually get to us. And our whole world changed March 16th, where we had one lady was sick that was in our safe house, took her to the doctor. Well, I took her to the emergency room, actually, a couple of days before, and they just assumed that she had it. He just said, "You're positive." They didn't test her. So we took her back to the doctor, a different doctor, not the emergency room, on March 16th, and we said, we needed testing. We need to be sure, because this would affect all of our staff, all of our volunteers, everybody, all the layers of people that interact with this person. And we're kind of multi-layered in that. And we all live they all live within a house, and so that puts everybody in that living space at risk. So they did test her, but it took at that time, and a lot of things have happened over the last few weeks, but it took 12 days to get results. But the doctor said, you're just going to assume that she's positive for this. Well, after 12 days, and I mean, at that point, everything went into quarantine. We just quarantined the safe house entirely. We told all the staff and volunteers to self-quarantine at home. We shut down all operations. So during that 12 days as we were waiting, we would just basically shut everything down. It was just about safety and containment to see if any other symptoms would surface at that point. The odd thing is the test came back negative, but the doctor interprets that on the phone, and he's like, that's a false negative. You totally have it. And by this time, she's over all the symptoms. Like, and we sort of, well, it's sort of played out, and, you know, she's okay. I mean, it got a little hairy, but she's okay. So we retooled, like everybody was doing at that time, so at the end of March, into where, okay, we're re-engaging all of our programming, lots of counseling and classwork, but it all has to be done online. So like everybody else, we're scrambling to kind of make that happen and figure that out, try to bring back some normalcy to the program experience for the ladies that we have within our care. And we kind of adjusted to that. There's pressure and stress around the management personnel within the safe house. It's a live-in situation, but because of the complexity around COVID, she was forced to be there 24/7 for 5 weeks with the ladies, and that was becoming unmanageable. Psychologically, it's just getting really, really challenging for everybody there, the residents as well as the manager. So we had other staff kind of step in, and you know, for a week, we had to start taking risks about how to support staff in that position, how to support the ladies, and try to give each other a break. And in that process, over the course of about a week and a half, the manager just up and resigned. So at this point, and we're still in this mode, our executive director, which is my wife, has actually moved in to the safe house to manage that. And so she's kind of pulling double time, managing the safe house in the evenings and still trying to fulfill most of her ED role, you know, during the day. So it's kind of unsustainable, and we're trying to figure that out. In the meantime, the classwork online went really well, and it just in the last couple of weeks, we've moved. We felt like it was safe after weeks and weeks and weeks of quarantine, no other symptoms from anybody in our eccentric circles of staff, volunteers, and personnel. So we started resuming classes at our learning center and counseling center location. But it's still like the contact that we have is all within sort of the Engedi bubble or family. And then we're asking everyone that, you know, to just be have a specific cohort of relationships that they're in relationship with, so we don't have kind of widespread willy-nilly contact as we bring, you know, potential contamination back in. Now, the really challenging thing that we're still not, we haven't resolved yet, is that we did not feel it was safe to bring in new residents, and that's a tragedy because people are so at risk, especially people in the sex industry. At risk for contamination. So it's a great opportunity to bring them into our care. But how to do that, we're trying to still figure out safely, and how to welcome them appropriately. Like, here, welcome to this new program. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to provide everything for you. By the way, you have to wear a mask and gloves and be locked in your room for 2 weeks so we can kind of see if you're contaminated or not. It's really strange. So we're navigating that. And yeah, there's a lot out there. So we're kind of understaffed, but we have really drawn in together and tried to figure out how to create or recreate the health and the normalcy of the program just within the staff itself. Volunteers haven't re-engaged yet, but by and large.
Well, that's, again, wild chaos right now. So thank you for sharing that. And Emily, tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your world and what's been going on in your world.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do any formal planning. Formal planning's not my strong suit, but the team has just done an amazing job adapting to this new way of operating. And the area that we're spending our time in is really thinking about what those long-term consequences are going to be for the families in our community and elsewhere, right? So it feels right now like things are a bit frozen, and when they unfreeze, I'm really concerned about what that impact is going to look like. So there's some supports and some stimulus and some things in place now that are sort of keeping people afloat. But the economic impact is surely to be long lasting, particularly for a lot of those families who were already in poverty or really kind of on the cusp of that. So that's where I like to spend, my time thinking about what does that look like for us and what are the opportunities for us as a community to really rise to this challenge. I think it's easy to think about just the immediate crisis around the functions, right? Like, how do we quarantine? How do we get that curve where it needs to be? How do we make sure that we have the equipment and the sanitation and the cleaning? And at the same time, there are so many families really struggling out there who are just kind of flying under the radar. You think about, for example, all the kiddos. I have 3 kiddos. I've locked them out of the house, not the 2-year-old, she's upstairs sleeping, but they're not in school, right? So there's all these extra complexities and so many vulnerable children who don't have the extra supports that come with their school engagement throughout the year. So there's a lot coming at us, and what our team has really experienced as they're delivering these services from home. We were worried about, how would people engage with us through electronic platform as opposed to those home visits. And what we found is absolutely they will, because people are struggling and the stress is really high. And particularly for parents who are having to try and deal with, how do you support your kids' social, emotional, and educational needs on top of, dealing with whatever economic stressors there are. It's a lot. And we aren't where we need to be in that as a community. And so this is the time for us to really be thinking about and asking hard questions about how do we move forward in this in a way that can try and address some of those challenges, because it was bad before, right? And now we're looking at budget cuts and what does that look like at the local government and the state government level, and what is the impact going to be? And I think sometimes it can be easy for us to just accept the reality that, well, this is what happened with the economy, and now we have to, make these cuts. But we're going to really need to ask ourselves some hard questions about how those cuts get made and who it is that they help and who it is that they hurt. So that's as you said, Leo, in the beginning, like thinking about the forward motion, right? Like, where do we go in the future? That's the space that I want to engage in for all of us, is really thinking about what our role is in that. And how do we make sure that we don't go backwards significantly while we deal with the crisis that COVID is.
Yeah, no, it's wild because everyone's got, especially just on this call specifically, has got somewhat of a similar story, because everyone has their personal life, everyone has their own problems and their issues and their challenges through all of this. And then at the other hand, like, you have to almost segment one world into a box and then your home life into a box, and do your best to just be the impassable membrane where you try to keep it in separate worlds. So tell me, you guys are all leaders. You're leaders, and sometimes you're leaders in ways that are different than other days. How do you lead through chaos? I mean, chaos is something that, let's say this person on my left hand will respond and panic and not know what to do. But people like you go, okay, this is how it's making me feel. You guys are processing, maybe you're processing the challenges at a higher level. How do you look at that chaos and go, well, it was already chaotic before. Maybe that's for you all. Maybe it was already chaotic before. This is just another day, another challenge in what I'm doing. Tell me more about leading through chaos. How do you lean into that?
I think one of the things that comes to my mind as you talked about, like, things can be were chaotic before. We talk about the mission world and shelter life as sometimes the sacred chaos that we enter into here on a daily basis. There's sometimes more chaos than sacred, and sometimes vice versa. And it's a beautiful mess, and still a mess at days. And I think I'm really excited to hear what others say. And I think one of the things that comes to my mind is just that level of scrappiness that many nonprofits have. And it's one of our values at the mission that there is a scrappiness to what we do, and not a scrappiness in a in some ways that you think of that term, but more in a way of like, we're going to make this work. Like, we're going to be resourceful. These are the resources that we have, the supports that we have, and we are going to try to piece this together. And one of the ways that at the mission that ends up looking is we ask the question often, if not here, then where? And so if that person is not going to receive that service or that help or that support today here, then where will they receive it? Because if it's not here, and the option is sending them out to the streets, or the option is just sending them back to the ER or sending them back to jail, that is not a good option. And that is not justice for that person. That's not helpful for them. It's not helpful for our system. It's not helpful for the community. And it's not helpful for staff who have to communicate that as well. And so on our end of things, leading through that crisis, we can just continue to ask that same question. If not here, then where? And so whether that means we figure out how to house that family that needs emergency housing for tonight. There's a night this last week that a family showed up and we didn't have a place at the Agape home. So we figured out a way to house them in another place here because no one else was able to do it that day. And that's just, there's a lack of resources in the community and there's a great need, and they're getting supports now towards the end of the week. But it's one of those things that, like, when somebody shows up after 5 p.m., staff are going to ask, if not here, then where? And the other option is sending them to the hospital. And so I think I have to give a lot of credit to the staff for continuing to ask that question through this crisis. And our guests, our clients know that that is the sort of question we're asking. And so when they come to us for help, we want to be that organization, that service, as the others here often are as well, to say, we're not just going to turn you away if we can't do it right here. We're going to find a way to make this work.
Sounds like an element of, I guess the word would be moxie, like having this, like, these aren't walls, these are speed bumps. And they, the car gets a little bumpy every once in a while, or it gets really bumpy, probably in your worlds. But how do you maintain that mindset? I mean, speak to that. Like, that is like, it's like a fire that burns inside of people. Not everybody has that fire, or maybe they do, but they don't realize it. How do you keep that fire burning?
Well, I think too, I love the term moxie. It goes right along with, I think, that scrappiness. And I think something that Emily was talking about too, with that long-term change, that is one of those things when we hit those roadblocks, when we hit those speed bumps that are there, that doesn't mean we just continue to be scrappy around them either. We have to advocate for that long-term change, that systemic change that needs to happen, so people aren't continually hitting those walls and seemingly not being able to receive the supports and the help that they need. And so those speed bumps, we need to take note of them. We need to bring those to people that can make that change. We need to advocate for that. Because if we just do that front end work, we can so easily lose heart, right? We have to look for that long-term restoration of the system and the change in the community and all that. So anyways, I'll pass it on to somebody else, but I love that term, moxie. That's great.
Me too, yeah. Anybody else want to talk a little bit about that moxie mindset that you all have?
So, when you were asking about leadership, it made me think of one of Skookum's values is transparency. And the way we say it is radical transparency. And, the way it plays out in how leadership is practiced at Skookum, not just by me, but by others, is, a real openness about the challenges that we're facing. Everyone who works at Skookum has seen their boss cry in a meeting. It just that we are not afraid of like a correct and honest assessment of the scope of the challenges before us. And we think, I believe that, that is, like, we correctly frame up the problem, it's half solved. But that requires an honesty with ourselves about what the problems are, and the challenges are, and about our limitations, the limitations of our understanding of them. So, for in a time of chaos and an ordinary time, for us, it is leadership is an exercise in being vulnerable, in practicing radical candor, radical transparency with one another. And the tone for that gets set by, the person who's in charge, but everybody plays. It is a team sport. We've all got to participate. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in one direction. It's got to be a function that something that everybody buys into.
Yeah. And running an organization, I mean, you can't do all of it. You individually that are like, you're obviously amazing at what you do, and you have such a strong drive to continue these missions forward, but you can't do it all. You have to have a team in place of other people who see what you see the way you see it, right? So what is that like if you have one bad apple in your crew, or how important is that culture and environment within your team?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. And I think that, the chaos, leading through chaos, or in this case, crisis, brings about a lot of good, and sometimes it exposes weakness. I've been amazed at our team, that people jump into creativity when it's like we're all shut down, super limited. We have to totally adjust on the fly, in the moment, to something that's really complicated. And what we find is focus. It's like, look, the most important thing we do, two things, is physical safety and emotional stability. So if we have some of our tools restricted now, we can't meet together in person, then it's all hands on deck in a different way, and the creativity comes. And how are we going to sustain that? So multiple phone calls, learning to use the online tools and engaging people in that way, just changing the structure. But doing that in such a way as the people that we're ministering to, is we are expressing and exemplifying hope, because they can so easily slip into a catastrophic thinking, and that can cause or be stirred by desperation, and that can make a lot of decisions that are really unhealthy. And that's the pattern they've been in. So what they get to see is our leadership sort of being in our personal response. One, we engage the responsibility to the person, and we express and use creativity. We focus on hope for the benefit of emotional care. And that's a really good thing for the people we serve to see and experience. We had to have creativity in a lot of different ways. I mean, we went from having a lot of speaking engagements and events on the docket at conference to nothing. Everything just went blank. So, like my department, I run the development department. So we just went into, we're going to apply for grants. Me and another staff member just jumped in, and we tackled something we'd never done before. We took on developing the garden at our safe house. There was a couple of ladies there that had an interest in that, and we're like, we're going to invest in that. I'm going to come over. I'm going to build a fence. We're going to invest in these raised beds. We're going to start growing vegetables like that, because they were interested in it. And it engages them in something that's very tactile and in the moment, and takes their mind off of catastrophizing what could happen to them or the organization or whatever later on. This is all really good stuff. And I think crisis kind of brings that to the surface. Sometimes weaknesses as well, and you've got to then deal with that. But then it highlights the strengths of your management philosophy and your team.
Yeah, it brings both forward, and yeah, absolutely. Emily, what about you?
I mean, I guess I would say, I think that, for Lydia Place, we love working with the community. And in a crisis like this, sometimes you see some of the best aspects of who and what we are as a community and as individuals. And I think the challenge is to make sure that we're taking care of the people while we work on the solutions. And so both internally and externally at Lydia Place, we want to make sure that we're taking care of the people who are taking care of the people, right? That's a really important thing for us as an organization, as a culture. But also to try and look at what the opportunities are. As I said before, there are opportunities for us as a community, as humans, to learn from this experience and to take an honest look at some of our flaws and our habits, and to try and carry forward with us some positive change in that, and to amplify the positivity that can come out of a time of crisis. And if we can try and focus on those things, it can help convert some of the anxiety and the stress and the fear of the unknown, and try to use that as kind of a catalyst for some positive change. And that's what I hope we can help do through our advocacy work, through our individual work with clients, but also collectively, right, through forums like this, where we can help bring people who, everybody has a way that they can give. Every single one of us can be part of something larger and more impactful if we work together on that. So at Lydia Place, we really like helping make connections between individuals and needs that end up as a win-win. And I think in a crisis, that opportunity is exponentially larger, right? Because the need is so big. And so I think that's, that for me is that's the shift, is trying to focus on what those opportunities are and how to make those creative connections for folks. I think it's really easy to get bogged down in some of the small details, and we lose sight of the bigger picture of where it is that we want to go as a community and what our collective values are or should be, and how closely are we living up to those. So I think there's just so much opportunity in and amongst really challenging times to have that growth, right? So it's painful. There's just so much pain right now all over the place. So it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on our own places and positions of privilege and have gratitude, but also make sure that we're not just recognizing that we're grateful for what we have, but that we're thinking about how it is that we came across those privileges, and how do we then turn that and look at folks, look at the systems differently, so that we can help make some progress, so that there aren't so many people struggling so significantly all the time.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who has been using the phrase crisis-tunity. And I like, you've pointed that out twice, Emily, that none of us would have chosen the situation that we're in, but there is a chance to learn. And, what we had pre-COVID wasn't like perfect. And there are things about it none of us really liked and we just lived with. So while we've got everything turned off, what parts of this system do we want to rebuild while we're not using them?
The challenge is that, when we're so eager to go back to normal, right, that we run the risk of losing the opportunity to actually say, wait a minute, like before we just jump back into exactly the way things used to be, which was also broken, right? Like, how do we pause long enough to say, what did we learn from this? And then let's move forward with some intention. And I think, I'm not quite seeing that yet. And I mean, even for us as a nonprofit sector, right, we're learning some stuff here, and boy, we could do some adaptations and some changing that would make us better off and advance our missions and our purpose. And I hope we get and create that opportunity to really be better on the other side of this.
Absolutely. It's interesting. You said something about privilege too, Emily, and that's something that I have been thinking. Well, I've been trying to stay grounded as much as possible and recognize that even when I was broke, was trying to start my business, barely paying myself, I still had privilege. And it's you don't really know, because it's your reality. That's what you're in, and that's what you think is the world is like. But it's so interesting to hear that, through all this, a lot of people it's almost like they're just being humbled. They're being knocked on their asses and they're being humbled. And it's a moment where they're like, maybe I should be reaching out to my parents more often. Maybe I should be giving more in my community. Maybe I should be connecting one-on-one with people that I've never met before, like real authentic connections, not the passing by, like high five, whatever it is. Are you guys, I mean, obviously you guys in your world, in the nonprofit world, especially in Whatcom County, everybody that I've met in that world is just absolutely amazing. Like, you guys are amazing human beings, and you obviously are collaborating with each other and have a lot of similarities in the mission of, well, the value of human life, right? And not just like, oh, this person has more value than, we all have value, right? And what have you seen as a response from our local community? Obviously, you guys, in response to each other, have banded together in as many ways as possible. But what have you seen from our community here in Whatcom County? Have you seen people also lean in and give and be involved, or have you seen people pull back? What have you seen?
Yeah, I'm seeing people lean in. I mean, it's, whether it's somebody setting up a $5 a month recurring donation because that's what they can give, and that $5 a month is significant for them, and they're saying like, I this is what I can do. I see that this is important. I can give this amount, right? So those, I mean, sometimes those are like my favorite donations because they indicate the heart in it, right? To folks who are, got their stimulus checks, whatever month or week that was, and said, we're fine, we don't need this. Lydia Place, please, give this to somebody who needs it more. So we're seeing a lot of folks really leaning in and stepping up in that way, which is a great byproduct, right? And those people are there anyway, but even in a time like this, when people double down and say, I'm gonna do even more, that's really heartwarming, because that's not a given. And I think part of what has been a little bit concerning to me is that we seem to, there's a little bit of attention on some of these issues, whether it's housing or food security or concerns about increases in domestic violence and child abuse, right? Like all of this stuff that is coming at us that we now are like, oh my gosh, we got to do something about this problem. So sort of like the frustrated pessimist in me says, but wait a minute. That was the problem pre-COVID, folks, right?
Yeah.
That problem was there. And if it's not okay now, why was it okay 3 months ago, right? And it's not like we haven't been knocking on the door and like screaming and shouting for ever about these issues. And so, but there is something, right? Like, so let's harness whatever that is that is making people pay attention a little bit now. Let's not lose that, right? Like, let's capture that and really use this as an opportunity to not only address those issues, but say like, wait a minute, why was I okay with this level of suffering, but I'm not okay with this level of suffering, right? Like, what is that in us as a society that hasn't figured that out yet? So there's an opportunity for us to engage, and those are the conversations that, as you can see, I like.
Yeah. And do you all think that, and again, I don't want this to be too opinionated, but you probably hear my opinion come straight through. Do you feel like it's a sense of, in a position of privilege, having our precious lives threatened? Some people have their lives threatened every single day, but now all of a sudden we have this invisible killer, sickness, economic killer, right? That's out there. And all of a sudden people are thinking about life in a different way. Are you all seeing that with like, we're up against the edge of a cliff, we're getting pushed forward, you know what I mean? Do you see that as well?
Yeah. I mean, there's something about that, like the immediacy of the danger that causes everybody to think existential thoughts in a way that they don't usually. And I'm with you, Emily, in the frustration about like, hey, wait a minute, like what's really that different? I've really appreciated the, like, I don't know, suspension of skepticism that I've seen. Like I appreciate Bellingham Bellingham as a community expects a lot from its, philanthropic efforts. It wants a level of sophistication that not every community demands. And it wants, if you're going to help, they want you to help effectively. And that's great. I like working in a community that demands that from its, its helpers, from its nonprofits. But, every attempt to help isn't perfect. And, one of the things that COVID has caused is people who I think maybe were frozen by their inability to do things exactly pitch perfect. They're just like throwing that out, like just suspension of skepticism. I'm just going to jump in and help, and that's really great. It's messy and it's like not always comfortable, but people are like jumping in to help, like they're running toward the fire. So to borrow a metaphor, and every once in a while, they like get up a little close and be like, "Oh, this is messier than I thought," and then they ask for help, and it's fun to help people like that, get a taste for, And I would say, Leo, you talk about how much you admire the people in the nonprofit world. I say, like, dude, water's warm, man. Like, come on in. Other people sell houses. Like, come on. There's lots to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm one of everybody here probably knows 15,000 realtors, so I'm one of many of that breed. So how do people jump in? Aaron and Bridget, how can we get people not just to donate money? And by the way, I am going to donate $100 to each one of your organizations. So I'm going to just start that rolling right now. And so I would also like to start a reoccurring donation as well. So anybody that's watching, join me, jump on, let's get it rolling. But how can people in our community jump in the water, right? As Ray would say, the boiling water. It's warm, it's hot.
All of these organizations have ways that people can roll up their sleeves and be involved right away, and multiple ways, and ways that are going to match your level of commitment and your schedule. I mean, each person could describe the specific opportunity in vivid detail, but I mean, it starts with an inquiry, it starts with a phone call. But I mean, there's lots to do.
Mm-hmm. Can I add to that? I totally agree with Ray. There, you can probably go to any of our websites and see volunteer opportunities and ways you can give and things that are needed and all of that. And those are much appreciated. Leo, I really appreciate the giving also monetarily as well to keep the lights on and toilets running and all of those things operating well. And we're really grateful for that. And I think too that one of the ways that is sometimes overlooked when giving to the nonprofit world is doing a bit of awareness and education in your own circles of friends and family. And so I have also been overwhelmed by the amount of like positive feedback and people wanting to give and everything during this time. And there have also been folks that when push comes to shove on that edge of the cliff, they're not leaning in necessarily to this sort of work, but they're asking big questions and they're frustrated as well. And they're concerned and they have lots of questions, and maybe stigma is coming out, and and it's not true. And ideas that everyone experiencing homelessness, for instance, uses drugs or has behavioral health problems or is dangerous, or all of those things, right? That some of us, we have in our heads, and maybe the pushing to the edge of the cliff is bringing that out because we're fearful, right? When we're in a place of fear, like we're not necessarily filtering, we're using our survival brains. And so I just think that there's opportunity here as well to have those hard conversations and to say, like, let's challenge each other in that. Is that real? Like, is that based in fact? Is that just stigma? Is that stereotype? Like, what is that there? And so I think that sort of giving back in the community, it can help a lot and it can do wonders. And so I would just encourage everyone in our own circles to be engaging in those hard conversations and confronting some of those stigmas and stereotypes that are out there.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's really good. I totally agree. Bridget, Ray, Emily, all of you just have great responses. What we need is what we've seen is people responding in a really positive way. It's so encouraging when people, I don't know if it's staying at home and they have more time, but I think people are more in tune with other people and they're actually doing that proactive, I'm going to call so-and-so, sometimes it's your mom, but sometimes we've experienced it from Engedi Refuge, is somebody calling here and saying, hey, how are you guys doing? Like people we haven't talked to in a long time are like, are you okay? And it's like, wonderful, like, yeah, you're thinking about us. And what can we do? And sometimes it's been kind of funny, but sure, could you bring some toilet paper down? Like if you can scour the county and find some, would you bring us some? Because we have a need, you know? And people are actually doing that. And it's really wonderful. So their care, the practical things. Two, partners. We have a whole variety of partners, business partners, personal partners, church partners. Some of our church partners have called and said, hey, I just want you to know we're on your side and we're not walking away. I know that's tough for a faith-based organization because their whole context of raising interest and support within their ministry has been shattered and taken out of the knees. So for them to call us and say, hey, we've got your back, we're not walking away from you guys. It's wonderful because we're in a similar boat. And that speaks volumes to their commitment. One thing that's really crazy and that one of the silver linings in this whole thing, especially around the sex industry, is the sex industry has kind of been taken out. And what this has done, no legislation has ever been able to do. And you've had, over the last 3 months, Las Vegas is shut down, and the casinos, and there's massive sexual exploitation there. The porn industry and brothels across the board have been shut down. You could not vote that. It's never been successful. This has taken that out, which has given people a pause when you have systemic slavery from the experience of victims, and you've been able to take a break and walk away, and everybody has this grand chance to say, did we need that? Was that necessary? What in the world are we doing? The aftermath of that is people whose lives are devastated physically, emotionally, socially, legally, every other way, spiritually, who have a moment to say, I need to get on a different path. And Engedi's there to provide that path, as well as many other places. And really, there's a bunch of roads. All of us together represent different people that are in crisis or experiencing trauma that have a chance to get inroads. So there's an opportunity to serve these people at a new level. It's an opportunity for people who've been part of the problem to reconsider entirely. And there's people that are part of the solution to re-engage or to continue their engagement on a dynamic level. And I encourage everybody to do that. And Leo, thank you so much just for your offering. That's just amazing. And it's just things like that. It's just, hey, it's for you to take notice of all of us and sort of our world and what we're doing, and to say, hey, I want to help and I want to bring some attention to it is huge. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking time, like I said at the start, to join us, even if you're in outer space. No, I really appreciate you all. And for those of you that are watching, please reach out to these people. These are all people within our community. There are leaders in our community that are making our Whatcom County, our Bellingham, our everything a better place for people that don't have privilege, but also for people that do have privilege. It's for everybody. It's the general good and value on human life. So in the description of this video, there is all of the information for Bridget Reeves, the Lighthouse mission, how you can find them on social media. Go follow them, follow what they're doing, get educated. And Aaron Newcomb, as with Engedi, websites on there, Instagram, obviously go find them on Facebook. And then Emily and Lydia Place, lydiaplace.org. On Instagram, go follow, get educated. And then Ray, obviously, with Skookum Kids at skookumkids.org. Go to these websites, browse around a little bit, get more educated on it. I think when you get more educated, you'll have a better understanding of how important it is. So thank you to all of you for joining me today. We're almost to Friday, so keep pushing. We're almost there. Thank you so much for what you all do in our community. And thanks for all that joined us today on the Building Bellingham Pivot Series. Thank you so much.